Yeah, but I just want to say, I do agree with you, Tawanda's story. It did reach out to me. And remember when the riots started, she was like, wait a minute. She could sense that it was going in the wrong direction, remember? And she was like, this is not the way we're supposed to be doing this. What is going on? When everything started erupting and she had to call a relative to come pick her up. But yeah, but all of them was pretty good. Even Nick's story of how his mother wanted him so badly to be out of Baltimore. And he just kept gravitating back, you know, and now he is here as, you know, one of our councilmen. I
I
love
just
that
kind
story.
of piggyback on what Linnell just said. I kind of changed your name on there too, just so we know your name's Linnell. But I noticed that with a few of the stories that, you know, a lot of folks were trying to run away from Baltimore, but they like gravitated back because they wanted to be able to serve Baltimore in a way or be able to do something that would better others' opportunities in, you know, in Baltimore as well. But yes, Tawanda definitely stood out. She kept the fight going and she wanted it to be for the right reason. And even if it wasn't just for her brother, but it was for other Black men who have, you know, died in the hands of someone else. It was kind of that situation where she really just wanted it to be a big picture situation, not necessarily her personal story. And I think that took a lot as well for her to kind of take herself out of the situation and not feel, you know, well, why didn't they fight for my brother? You know, it's like, I'm going to fight for someone else's son or someone else's, you know, sibling, someone else's brother at this time. So I think she definitely did stand out a lot in the book.
Anybody else want to add a character that a person that really stood out, a story that really stood out?
Can't get off mute. Okay, am I saying that correctly, Barbie?
Yes, it is
Okay,
Barbie.
yes.
Okay.
I
Well,
saw you raising your hand, sorry.
oh, thank you. Anthony from Shake and Bake really stood out for me because it was such a community effort, and it was just lovely the way they responded, especially to support the community. They weren't quite sure where they fit in, but they knew that it was meant to be. It was a total community effort, and going out, you know, to really show support and to be positive and fun. With the skate party, it was really exciting.
And one story that stood out to me was Jenny, especially when she was so rooted in the cause from the ground up, with her defending some of the people that would end up in these circumstances. And the line when she actually gets to Penn North and that she sees that little boy in her phone and she's like, I know he's about to get it. And the boy is like, I know you think that's what I'm about to do, but I'm about to do something different. That got me because it reminded me that we all have like things about us that we don't even recognize sometimes. And it's not even that it's an intentional, but sometimes it just comes out the wrong way, or that action comes out the wrong way. But she owned it. And I respected her story because she owned all of it, and not just the fact that she supported the kids in the community as a public defender, but also if it came down to me versus them, I'm gonna be concerned about me. That was an honest reaction, and I respected the fact that she said it, and I also respected the fact that she felt like when Greg stood up for them and slashed at holes, like that changed the game, and she's the only one that took it from that perspective in this particular book. Everybody else took it as an assault against, you know, the city, an assault against the police, an assault against the fire department. But she took it as, you're not going to weaponize their fire hose against us, and she owned it. I respected her for both of those points of view. Any other comments about the people represented? I like the fact that it was so many different perspectives. It all wasn't one point of view. You actually saw it from the ground up, and also from like almost like an aerial view down, depending on the perspective. So I felt like that it was a well-rounded story because of that. One of my follow-up questions to that is, for people that actually live in the city or live near the city, when you read these accounts, for me, it took me back. I remember being at work and us getting that call. We were in a training and the manager from Penn was in the training with me. And we get this call like, your building's in trouble. You need to leave this building and go back to Penn. Does anybody else have any personal accounts for when they first heard about this uprising and the things that happened on that day?
I actually have a personal account. My family lived on Smallwood Street. This is where we grew up, right near North Avenue. We were blocks from North and Penn. My mother still lived in the city at the time of the uprising, a few blocks away. I remember it hit me when I saw the situation at Mondawmin with the kids and how you saw that on the news. You saw, you know, it's like they showed the children just converging on the metro station. And like in the book, and how Mr. Partee said, he said, you didn't really know what was going on, but then you heard these murmurings on social media and things like that about a purge and that whole thing. And so I think that you saw different perspectives. My mom lived a few blocks away. She was like staying in a house, but right down the street was that Korean-owned store that they went in and they took the Korean store out. So it was like, I felt it because my mom was right there in the fray and not in the house, but the community itself. It just kind of converged at that North and Penn Station area. So that was a different perspective. I was concerned about my mom, but then you saw what was going on and you just felt for the people, and to feel such, I guess, like not, the anger, and then it was fueled by people who came in who had nothing to do with it, but you know, you had those agitators and things that came in and made it just look just absolutely horrific. When it wasn't good, but you still felt that the people had the right to be out there and to protest.
And it's funny you mentioned that my mom passed away in October of 2014, but she lived on Pulaski, which is several blocks down near Smallwood. And so I was saying, when I was hearing everything, I was like, man, if my mom was living, she would be so afraid, because she would go to those stores sometimes on Penn North. You know, she would go to Mondawmin often to shop because it was several blocks from her home. And I was like, man, you know, they burnt down the CVS, you know, a place that the seniors and some of the sick people in the community need this. But at the same time, they were destroying the police officer cars, and I saw it on television. And it made me upset, but at the same time, I felt the anger that these young people had, that the police are not treating, Black people, appropriately. So I felt that anger, and I understood why, hey, we're destroying what we can get close to. And if need be, we'll go down and we will destroy the inner harbor, because we know that's where the money is, for the city. So it's sad on both ends.
Can I piggyback on what you said?
Absolutely.
Of course, go for it.
Okay. My name's Bree. I was an EMT. I'm an EMT, and I was actually working during when the riots hit. I was at Levendale, I believe. We were getting a patient, about to take him to the ER, and then I get like a buzz on my phone, my work phone, saying, "Hey, if y'all gotta go to Sinai," we was already at Sinai at this point. He was like, if you guys want to have to go to Sinai, you have to call Sinai ahead, because something's going down in Pennsylvania, and there's gonna be a big rush because Sinai's a trauma 2 center, and the university was already booked. So I was like, okay. So as we're waiting in line for my patient to get a room/bed, next thing you know, it was like these wave of ambulances coming one by one by one. Everyone had like a cop, at least one, like have a cop on there in full riot gear. And I'm just like, yo, what is going on? And then by the time it was all finished, my mom hit my phone, my sister hit my phone. I'm pretty sure my grandmother even hit my phone. And they was like, Brandy, are you okay? I was fit. I'm like, why wouldn't I be? But I'm still like, not even knowing what's going on. This is like 30 minutes in after the riots, when the riots are starting. So they was like, you don't know what's going on? Like, something's going on around Pennsylvania Ave. We can't get in touch with Etienne. He's supposed to be home from school. And have you talked to Etienne? And I'm like, no, I'm at work. And then they was like, oh my, they was like they're rioting, like they're just breaking stuff and stuff like that. And then I'm like, oh God. So then I like looked on my phone, saw the feeds, saw people rioting and looting Mondawmin. The CVS got burnt down. And I'm like, what did the CVS do to y'all? And then later on, so what I remember most about that night, later on, I didn't have a car at the time, and I mostly depended on the subway, and the subway got closed that night. And I remember I was thinking, I was like, how am I going to get home tonight? Because I have no way of getting home, and I'm afraid to like attempt to catch the like, I don't know how I'm going to get home. So then my partner was like, I'll drop you home in the ambulance. And if you can't go home, because I lived on Pennsylvania and Brunt. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place with this story. And she said, but if you can't go home tonight, you can stay over at my house. And I did not know this woman like that, you know, but she was nice enough to lend me a couch to sleep on, because my home could possibly been destroyed. Not my home, but I couldn't have possibly got home that night.
Right, because you lived in that community. Mm-hmm.
Yes, like, honestly, I lived literally a block away from where the downtown locker room was that ended up getting burnt to the ground, that never got rebuilt. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff that got destroyed around my neighborhood never really got rebuilt. Mm. And so they end up letting us through because we're in the ambo. And I got home, I opened my door, and then like it was like this big relief just came over me because my brother was home. And you know, then I went to bed that night, and I came to work the next day, and then they straight up was like, yeah, just go home, because you know, majority of the hospitals we transport out of they can't give us anything. So, and we can't transport around there because of the riots and the cleanup and the National Guard and all that. So just go home. And then I was just like, okay. Because honestly, I was about to call out, but my mother told me not to, because they probably needed the extra help.
Wow.
Thank you, Bree, for that very personal account. Extremely personal. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, reading this story literally takes you back to the days. You can't help but remember, like, having to reroute myself from Orleans Street, where I worked, because 83 was shut down because protesters were on it every evening. People being afraid to even be out after dark. The library closed early those early weeks because we were conscious of staff not being out until 8 o'clock. And so, I mean, it affected so many things that these 5 days were tough days.
Yeah, and then on top of that, the curfew, my biggest fear was like me or my younger brother. My younger brother, he has autism. He's about almost 6 foot. You know, I was afraid that with the curfew in place, you know, nothing against cops, but all they need is a reason.
Right. And by him having autism, maybe he wouldn't respond the way they would want him to, and then they could, you know, get in some altercation with him, perhaps, by him just being outside. So I get it.
And then something that was really disgusting was, you know, I also read the book, I Got a Monster, about the gun trace task force, and learning that there were these police officers who sworn to protect and defend us were exploiting the unrest to fuel their corruption was nauseating. It was disgusting.
And we do recommend that that title. The library has the authors from that book coming soon. And it's a great pair for this one to understand some of the things that were in the backdrop of Baltimore. Even while we saw all this national attention on the unrest, there were some things that were happening in the background that book really covers.
And what's the title of that book? What's the title?
Oh, it's called I Got a Monster.
Oh,
and that is, it was written by two former journalists, and it is about the Gun Trace Task Force. And if you thought you knew the story, this is like The Departed in Baltimore. The corruption is so deep, but a lot of, what they're talking about is juxtaposed against, what happened to Freddie Gray. And so they're linked. It's all linked, all of it. And
wow.
it's well written, and it's a very powerful narrative, as is 5 Days.
Yes, 5 Days is as well. I mean, even just reading the prologue, I was like, wow, is this how people view Baltimore? And I mentioned it to a friend about the book club that was going on tonight, and she was like, well, didn't you already know about these things? Didn't you already know about the educational system, the criminal, the police brutality? And I'm like, yeah, you're right, I did. But I guess because I'm reading Westmore's words and they just coming out at me like, it's like it's a setup for the poor boy. And I was like, wow. And then when they were referring back to the 1968 riots, how people were destroying their own communities. And like you said, they never get rebuilt. But I think at the time, the people are like, I don't care. I don't own this CVS. I'm not making any money off of this, so they feel, yeah, it's just.
I agree with now.
So,
yes.
So deep.
It's layered.
It's layers to this.
Yeah.
It's a system that is just having a hard time correcting itself, or us being able to correct it, because there's so many different levels to it. Like you said, reading the beginning, reading his backstory, Freddie Gray's backstory, talking about the lead poisoning, talking about him being in the 10th grade at 18 years old, and basically you're out of the system now. You're out of school. So it's that school to prison pipeline that then takes place, because then he was arrested shortly after that, and it was a cycle. And so just seeing it from the very beginning and moving forward, but seeing that cycle take place was.
And a story about his mother.
Yes.
It's generational.
It's generational.
Here she is. And I'm trying to think, wait a minute, was she 20? She was already addicted to drugs. And then she was pregnant and she had twins. And then she had to live in a project. I was like, man, this, even though my upbringing wasn't like that, I still could feel for them. And I think a lot of times people look at the end story. Oh, well, he was a criminal. He resisted arrest. He was his mother was a drug addict. But I mean, come on, guys, let's go back all the way to the beginning and see why this is happening. And yeah, so many layers, man. This book is deep. I love it.
And as a person that worked in that community, that story is on repeat constantly. It is not an isolated situation. It's not an isolated story. And when you walk into that environment and you feel like you have to produce change, and how can I help you find a job if you are facing addiction? How can I help you meet another need if housing is not secure? Like, there are so many things. If you can't eat, how am I gonna help you paint? Like, these things literally go hand in hand over and over again. The library is one of those places that tries to be a resource, like the social worker in the library program, where if somebody does have a need, we try to link them with services to support them, have groups that meet now virtually to support them. So if you want to know more about that, prattlibrary.org is where you should go. And just look up the social worker program. If you know anybody that needs help, that's one of the ways to get them help. I've actually been in Penn and seen people come in with no housing and leave with a referral to a shelter. So it's in real time, it's really helping people. So I think that's a wonderful segue to the next question, which is when we're looking at the social justice efforts from 2015 and even up into 2020, what do you think has changed and what has remained the same?
I think that we're in the process of change. I don't think that we have done as much change as needs to be changed. I've come to the Penn Library because I was a part of the group, the Black Writers Guild. And they were
You're going in
Miss
and
Carla,
out.
you're going out.
Yeah.
Say that again, please.
I was coming to the Penn Library because of the Black Writers Guild that would meet there once a month. And so I had the opportunity to come and see the neighborhood. I drove through the neighborhood regularly. I live close to the police station down on Mount Street. And so I was in and out of the neighborhood all the time. I worked out in Howard County, and when I talked to people out there, they laughed in my face because of what was going on in the city. And, oh, you got to go and deal with the, the curfew. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's where I live. That's what I have to do. But as far as changes, I really would like to see, what's going to happen with the decree. I really want to see what's going to happen with that. I don't know and haven't heard as much as I would like to about it. The consent decree. When driving through the neighborhood and I would see the police pull over just pull up the young guys and throw them up against the wall. I mean, they were so bad. They were just dropping their pants right down in the street during the day. They just did not care. And that was really upsetting to me. I've been dealing with mentoring programs and trying to help young people. But I mean, these other people who have these positions of power, they must change. They must change what they're doing. They must change what they're thinking in order to help this city become better.
Mm-hmm. Jim, I heard you speaking earlier. We kind of cut you. Did you want to say anything? Did you have something?
I was in the prior question. I was just talking about how a lot of this is pervasive. And when I was on the school board, even walking into a school, you'd see water fountains that say, don't drink the water because of lead paint. And you go into a person's house, there's lead paint. And lead paint causes cognitive problems. It causes all kinds of problems. And that's why we have a very high percentage of kids in the city that are in special ed, because they have to deal with all these issues every day. I mean, you can't even drink water in school. So it's just, pervasive, I guess.
I agree, Jim. I do remember being in elementary school and they had to bring in our water coolers because we couldn't drink the water from out of the water fountain because of the rust in the system. Yeah. And, I also think about the fact that a lot of our books came from schools that were outside of our district. And I would look in there and I would say, oh, Hebron, Mount Hebron. And I'm like, oh, I had to get, the hand-me-down books from other school districts, and hopefully it was still in one piece, this being in a Baltimore City school, Thankfully, I had amazing teachers and people that cared, and my mom kept me in the library. Thanks, Mom. But, helped me make sure that I was maintaining my education, but not everybody had those same resources available. And to piggyback off of what Zandra said earlier, when having a social worker in the library is absolutely important. I'm thinking about, I used to work in the schools actually as a teacher's assistant, but I was thinking about it this morning and it had nothing to do with this conversation about my students that would come to school and hadn't eaten in 3 days over the weekend. How are you able to function in the classroom? I got to take you out and get you a snack. Nobody's washed their clothes. You showed up to school on a snow day before the schools were even open because someone put you on a bus. I was at a school over in Northeast Baltimore. My student was coming from Edmondson Village on a bus, 8 years old. I worked with third graders. And thinking about where they are today and if they made it is a biggest thing that continues on my mind. Where are these babies at today? Were they able to get out of a system that was not set up for them to succeed?
Yes. Yes.
Well, the other thing that's scary now is kids can't come to school, or some of them dependent on those 2 or 3 meals a day.
Yes.
They can't even come to school to get that food.
That is true. That is so true. And I'm in the educational system too. I've been in it for 16 years, and it is so political too. I'm like, man, I left the financing world to come to this educational field, and this just as political. But I don't know. I think when I think back to 2015 and all of these young people that were, getting murdered, even when they did the right thing, even when they tried to follow what the police was trying to order them to do, they still were killed. And now here we are in 2020 and it's still happening. Mm-hmm. So that part to me sticks out. It has not changed. Why? It has not changed. And I don't think we all want to say, get rid of the police. No, because I remember Officer Friendly. We had police officers at our school that, unite with the kids and have a good relationship with them. So, and I have family members that are police officers and military. So I do value them. But at the same time, there are the ones that do not belong there anymore. Stop covering up for them and let them go. It is time to change in that aspect. I do think that since everything has come out more in the open and we're talking more so about race issues, I'm hoping that it's just not talk and that we all can just come together and just be truthful, be open, and then from there begin to try to put things in place to make those changes.
Can I just say, Herb put a great message from the author's notes in the chat box just now, and I'm just going to read it out for those that might be on the phone or can't see it. But it said that in the author's notes 2020, it says, if we permit these tragedies to recede from memory, we risk missing the opportunity to change the system ultimately responsible for these injustices. I think that's powerful. Thank you for that note, Burton.
Can I say something?
Sure, Brie.
Okay. So, physically, nothing much changed in these next 5 years, but I feel as though something that was a black problem is now everybody's problem. This is like the first time ever in this year where you go to a protest, there is Black people, there is white people, there is Asian people, there's even South Asian people, there's Hispanic people. Everybody
I do appreciate that. Yes.
For this, like everybody came together, like their family member was messed up. Originally, 5 years ago, the Freddie Gray incident was just Black people, and then you have like a little bit of other people, but no, you can go to any protest and see that it's everyone. Honestly,
all over the country.
Yes, the one thing that did change. The one thing that did change is the attitude towards the problems. It used to be, oh, okay, he got killed. He was a thug, sweeping under the rug. 6 months later, you find out, boy, don't get no justice. All right, whatever. And move on. But now we don't got that. Now we got people. Now, also, I think what also boiled down to it, reason why we have all these people out here is because, one, the pandemic. You would think that, like, with everything going on, people would chill, like people, not chill, but people would calm down with the injustice. But then, like, next thing you know, while we were in the house, worried about where we going to get our work, where we going to eat, like, am I sick? You've come to find out that there was a dude that Arbery got killed by 2 white men that felt as though they can take justice in their own hands. Yeah. And then you find out Breonna Taylor got killed in her own home.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk about that. And then you find out that a man that George Floyd got his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 42 seconds. Mm-hmm. So with all this boiled down, everybody's like, hold up, why the heck was none of this in the news And all this happened in like March, April, and May. And this is June we talk, and this is June, and we talking about it now. So now you have all this civil unrest on top of the pandemic, and people already frustrated because they can't see family members. They can't see older family members. You gotta worry about not getting your cousin sick that got cancer. And you gotta worry about your kids in the house driving you crazy. And also, it's just like, it's a lot of unrest in the home, and on top of what's going on in the outside world. So yes, I do believe some things have changed. It's the public's eye on these atrocities, because that's what they are, atrocities and murders.
Right. And you know too, what has helped, remember in the book they said the cell phones, because people, regular citizens, start recording to show the world that, hey, wait a minute, this person wasn't resisting. He's sitting in his car, he's going to get his driver's license, and he's shot right there in front of his girlfriend and his children. You know, so I think that's another thing that started waking people up, like, wait a minute. We're not getting this same old story that you guys have rehearsed after victim after victim. That's not the way it's happening. And so the cell phones.
That stuck out.
Everybody's recording.
It was citizen journalism is what they called it in the book, citizen journalism. And that it was in my mind. I was driving and I was listening and I was like, oh, I need to write this down, you know? So that was something that we have new. And I believe, you know, media portrays it in one way. And then when you get the story from the citizen that was actually the witness and putting it on social media and creating that firestorm around these situations, that's when the awareness is heightened. That's when the emotions are heightened. Nancy, that's you.
I just wanted to mention, you know, I have the Citizen app, which is, you know, where you find out about, you know, what's happening in your neighborhood or somewhere else. And what I've noticed is that when I go on Twitter, Citizen is the first video they're showing. If there's a fire, an accident, an altercation, it's Twitter first, Citizen app on Twitter. And then all the news organizations are using the Citizen video. And what's interesting is I think it really helps us, you know, have that person on the scene, whether it's, you know, a mugging down the street or a carjacking, or whether it's a house fire or an auto accident, or, you know, God, that awful explosion. I heard about it first on Citizen, and all the news organizations heard about it first on Citizen. So that kind of supports the, you know, citizen journalism thing. People are just seeing and sharing. And I think in general, it's a really good thing.
I think another change to kind of piggyback that is you have the media picked up the police's version first. So if they vilified the person, if they, you know, released their arrest record or whatever, even if it was old, they made it seem like it just happened yesterday. But then you have to combat that, the citizens' version of it, which is, no, that's not how I saw it. And this is the video to prove it. And that's been coming back to get the police, to be honest with you, in a lot of these cases, because the police department has put out a statement that gives one version, but when the real life version comes out from these tapes or these videos, it's a whole different story.
That's a very important point, Sandra, very important.
So I saw Randy's hand up, and then Jim said,
let me make sure I'm not on mute. So to piggyback on, you know, the one, I think a big difference, and I don't remember who mentioned it before, of 2020 is how so many people from so many different ilks and, you know, races, ethnicity, ages, you name it, came together. What I found to be very, well, I mean, let alone how frustrating and upsetting and everything else 2020 has been, and it's not over yet. But what I found really frustrating this when they, in particular, the protests over the summer, when George Floyd was murdered, and I found the coverage by the media, because one of the things that I thought, you know, the local Baltimore TV stations had
had, you know, showed Baltimore, and Baltimore was actually just amazing. Like whether it was the protests around City Hall or the marches that went down 83, and they were all peaceful and they were all like wonderful, and they and none of that showed up on CNN or MSNBC. I'm not going to talk about Fox because I don't watch Fox, but the national news didn't pick up on this I mean, it was horrible. I mean, everything about it is horrible, but to just shine a small light on how people came together, peacefully protested, and I mean, it just, to me, you know, the light should have been shined on Baltimore at the time, because it really showed again how, you know, we're Baltimore, this is what we do, this is how we come together, and I think that's a key difference between where we are today and where we were 5 years ago. But question is where we're going, and, you know, just trying to, you know, have some hope and faith that we'll continue to do, you know, to approach these things that way.
Absolutely.
And when you said that, it reminded me that the library was a focal point during that time. A lot of donations came to the branch that was then given out to the neighborhood, including diapers and basic needs that would have been met by the CVS or the Rite Aid in the area, or some of the other stores that just couldn't open or that were already damaged. So people did donate and really, you know, come together and help that neighborhood when they really needed it.
Jim, did you have something else you wanted to say? I saw your hand up. You were kind of leaning forward earlier. If not, don't worry about it.
You say Jim or Stu?
Jim.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I would also like to piggyback on the comments on the. Said no?
Can you get some stuff?
No, go ahead, Bree.
Randy, go ahead.
All right, so another thing I would like to piggyback off is the thing you said about the media. Another thing I noticed about the media now, like 5 years ago, if the story of George Floyd came out, if he had a criminal record, they'll be all over it. But if he didn't, his story would have just been swept under the rug. But now what we're seeing now is they're not really bringing up criminal records or you know, questionable past or none of that. Like, I don't think I've ever seen on like CNN or whatever about Breonna Taylor possibly being a gang member, because they was trying to push that narrative online saying like, you know, reason why they had a warrant was because her car was parked out front of a known drug house and that's how they got the warrant and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, where did you hear this from? Like,
I do feel
it's
like
a part of reframing that narrative in order to build the story that's going to support the jurisdiction and the police department in the end.
I do agree with that, Jandra. I feel like, you know, we heard a lot about folks' stories, but not about what the situation was. It was kind of like to deflect off of what was happening in the legal system and with, you know, the death of these folks, these unarmed people. But we would hear about, you know, who they were married to. You would hear about, you know, who had a girlfriend. We would hear, you know, they didn't finish high school. Everything bad that they could portray about that person to kind of take away from the fact that they didn't do anything for this to happen to them at this moment. I think that that's where the media really kind of, you know, went a little astray, is by sharing other stories that had absolutely nothing to do with that person and that situation at that time. Nancy.
That's what I appreciated most about the book, is that it delved deeper. I've been in communications my entire career. I know that you've got to take a complex story and put it down into a headline and a 30-second clip. And the book, Wes Moore's deep dive, really helped me to get a better handle on what was. It's not literally, because there are thousands and thousands of people in this city, but even the stories of those people helped me to understand better what was really happening and what people's motivations were, and just so much more of a deep dive than a 30-second news clip could do.
Yeah. So I would have never thought about the, the police chief, hearing his side and the stresses he was going through in his life, or even about the Orioles guy, the fact that, he's like, oh, do I keep these people in the stadium? Do I let them lose? But at the same time, he was kind of caught in this quandary of like, what should I do to keep these people safe, but also to reflect upon why the folks in the city are angry and upset. And so it was great to hear just the various stories and how their perspective and their walk through their life during that moment.
And even the fact that he acknowledges that he was able to ride through these city streets with no problem. Mm-hmm. But if you or I would have rode through these streets, we would have been pulled over and questioned on why we were in these streets. I mean, it's just night and day. Two different worlds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do want to say that we're coming toward the close of our conversation, but I do want to acknowledge and let everyone know that we're going to actually have a conversation on November the 10th with Wes Moore and Jim Campbell from AARP. And some of this conversation, some of the stories and some of the messages and the questions that come from this conversation are going to help frame that next conversation. So if you do have a question that you would like to ask the author and have us consider, please put it in the chat box, or please raise your hand so we can recognize you and record it. Because this is the beginning. This is like a stepping stone toward this dialogue. This is not over. We really do want to see Baltimore in a better light. We want to see our communities addressed in a better way. And the way to do that is to sometimes talk openly about the issues and how we can combat some of the stereotypes and some of the problems. When Joy was talking about the students, I think about when I first started coming out of college, I did not know Baltimore until I started to work in a branch in Baltimore. When I got to know kids like Malik, and Malik was a 6-year-old who ran with a little crew. They were all between the ages of 4 and 6, and they walked Patterson Park like they were adults at 6. And they looked out for each other. They all lived like in the same block. They took care of each other. And I wonder sometimes, where's Malik? Where are the other kids that ran with him? Because they were on their own, and they weren't even 8 or 9 or 10. They were 6 and 4. So sometimes you do wonder exactly what happened to some of those kids that were in compromised situations, but you tried your best in your role in their lives to give them hope and to give them access and to expand their horizons and let them know they had opportunities. But it's a hard city to grow up in, and the people that get out of it are really fortunate.
Absolutely. But yes, like Zandra said, if you have any questions that you would like us to share with Wes Moore on November 10th, once again, that discussion will be held. We can also, whoever's on this list right here, we can let you know firsthand when registration opens so that you can join us. Also, for those that signed up, and if you would like to have a hard copy of the book, if you did not receive one, I have some more copies that I can also send out to you. You can reach out to us. I will put the address in the chat box, but I will also send out a note afterwards thanking you for joining us today. But once again, this was a wonderful discussion. I want to thank our partners with Enoch Pratt Free Library, Miss Zandra Campbell, and her partners that were online today, Mr. Herb Malino and Tracy Diamond. I appreciate you guys being here as well. Thank you to my state president for AARP Maryland, Jim Campbell, my communications director, Miss Nancy Carr, my program specialist. He's learning about Baltimore because he's going to move here soon, but Adrian Ramos, he's on as well. But once again, thank you for joining us for today's discussion. If you still have time, feel free to put any questions you may have in that chat box or any final comments. We will take those as well. Thanks.
Sandra did a great job. I want to thank her for moderating. Did a great job. Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for participating in this really, really meaningful discussion. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Everyone have a good evening. Stay safe, and we'll see you again soon. Great discussion.
Thank you.